Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for February the 24th. Today, we're reading together a couple of chapters, Exodus chapter 11 and also Exodus chapter 12. Exodus 11 is super short, and Exodus 12 is a little bit long, but it all really is the continued narrative of the Exodus, and really probably goes further than that, probably goes into chapter 13 and verse number 16. Is probably the whole of the narrative of the Exodus. And then once we get to chapter 13 and verse 17, we're going to see as the people go, then we're going to see Pharaoh take off after them around that time. So let's read together here in Exodus 11. Again, this is the climax of the plague narrative. What's going to take place in chapter 11 is actually something that God had told Moses previously that was going to happen. Going all the way back to chapter 4 and verses 21 through 23, we see the Lord telling him that I'm going to go up against Egypt, and Pharaoh is going to be hard-hearted, and eventually I'm going to take Pharaoh's firstborn. I'm going to kill his firstborn son as a show of power to show him that I am the God to be obeyed and respected. So some of what we see here in chapter 11, really, I would say verses 1 through 3 of chapter 11 is the author referencing back to what God had previously said to Moses in chapter 4 and verse 21 through 23. Let's go ahead and read together here, beginning in chapter 11, Exodus chapter 11, verse number 1, reading all the way through the end of chapter 12. Yahweh said to Moses, Exodus 11, verse number 1, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you out of here. Now announce to the people that both men and women should ask their neighbors for silver and gold items. Yahweh gave the people favor with the Egyptians. In addition, Moses himself was very highly regarded in the land of Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and the people. So Moses said, this is what Yahweh says. About midnight, I will go throughout Egypt, and every firstborn male in the land of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the firstborn of the servant girl who is at the grindstones, as well as every firstborn of the livestock. Then there will be a great cry of anguish throughout the land of Egypt, such as never was before or ever will be again. But against all the Israelites, whether people or animals, not even a dog will snarl, so that you may know that Yahweh makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these officials of yours will come down to me and bow before me, saying, get out, you and all the people who follow you. After that, I will get out. And he went out from Pharaoh's presence, fiercely angry. The Lord said to Moses, Yahweh said to Moses, Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, but Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his land. Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, they must select an animal of the flock according to their father's families. One animal per family. If the household is too small for a whole animal, that person and the neighbor nearest his house are to select one based on the combined number of the people. You should apportion the animal according to what each will eat. You must have an unblemished animal, a year-old male. You may take it from either the sheep or the goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of the month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animals at twilight. They must take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses where they eat them. They are to eat the meat that night. They should eat it roasted over the fire, along with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not try any of it raw, or do not eat any of it raw, or cooked in boiling water, but only roasted over fire. Its head, as well as its legs and inner organs. You must not leave any of it until morning. Any part of it left until morning you must burn. Here is how you must eat it. You must be dressed for travel, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in a hurry. It is Yahweh's Passover. I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night and strike every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, both both people and animals. I am Yahweh. I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. The blood on the houses where you are staying will be a distinguishing mark for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No plague will be among you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day is to be a memorial for you, and you must celebrate it as a festival to Yahweh. You are to celebrate it throughout your generations as a permanent statute. You must eat unleavened bread for 7 days. On the first day, you must remove yeast from your houses. Whoever eats what is leavened from the first day through the 7th day must be cut off from Israel. You are to hold a sacred assembly on the first day and another sacred assembly on the 7th day. No work may be done on those days except for preparing what people need to eat. You may do only that. You are to observe the festival of unleavened bread, because on this very day I brought your military divisions out of the land of Egypt. You must observe this day throughout your generations as a permanent statute. You are to eat unleavened bread in the first month, from the evening of the 14th day of the month until the evening of the 21st day, until the evening of the 21st day. Yeast must not be found in your houses for 7 days. If anyone eats something leavened, that person, whether a resident alien or native of the land, must be cut off from the community of Israel. Do not eat anything leavened. Eat unleavened bread in all your homes. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, go, select an animal from the flock according to your families and slaughter the Passover animal. Take a cluster of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and brush the lintel and the 2 doorposts with some of the blood in the basin. None of you may go out the door of his house until morning. When Yahweh passes through and strikes Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, he will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you. Keep this command permanently as a statute for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, you are to observe this ceremony. When your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? You are to reply, it is the Passover sacrifice to Yahweh. For he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians, and he spared our homes. So the people knelt low and worshipped. Then the Israelites went and did this. They did just as Yahweh had commanded Moses and Aaron. Now at midnight, Yahweh struck the every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and every firstborn of the livestock. During the night, Pharaoh got up, he along with all his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud wailing throughout Egypt because there wasn't a house without someone dead. He summoned Moses and Aaron during the night and said, get out immediately from among my people, both you and the Israelites, and go worship Yahweh as you have said. Take even your flocks and your herds as you asked, and leave, and also bless me. Now the Egyptians pressured the people in order to send them quickly out of the country, for they said, we're all going to die. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading bowls wrapped up in their clothes on their shoulders. The Israelites acted on Moses' words and asked the Egyptians for silver and gold items and for clothing. And Yahweh gave the people such favor with the Egyptians that they gave them what they requested. In this way, they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites traveled from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 able-bodied men on foot, besides their families. A mixed crowd also went up with them, along with a huge number of livestock, both flocks and herds. The people baked the dough they had brought out of Egypt into unleavened loaves, since they had no yeast, for when they were driven out of Egypt, they could not delay and had not prepared provisions for themselves. The time that the Israelites lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on the same day, all the Lord's military divisions went out from the land of Egypt. It was a night of vigil, in honor of the Lord, because he would bring them out of the land of Egypt. The same night is in honor of Yahweh, a night vigil for all the Israelites throughout their generations. Yahweh said to Moses, verse 43 of Exodus chapter 12, this is the statute of the Passover. No foreigner may eat it, but any slave a man has purchased may eat it after you have circumcised him. A temporary resident or hired worker may not eat the Passover. It is to be eaten in one house. You may not take any of the meat outside the house, and you may not break any of its bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. If an alien resides among you and wants to observe the Yahweh's Passover, every male in his household must be circumcised, and then he may participate. He will become like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat it. The same law will apply to both the native and the alien who reside among you. Then all the Israelites did this. They did just as Yahweh had commanded Moses and Aaron. On that same day, Yahweh brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt according to the military divisions. And that is Exodus chapter 11 and Exodus chapter 12. All right, there's a lot going on within this chapter. We'll give a quick summation here. Again, this is the climax of the plague narrative, and probably the way that verse 1 of chapter 11 should be read is the Lord had said to Moses, because remember, we leave at the end of chapter 10 where Moses says the bargaining time is, or excuse me, Pharaoh says the bargaining time is over. You're not going to see me anymore. Once you leave, you're gone. If I see you again, I'm going to kill you. Moses says, I will never see your face again. And then we read chapter 11, we read that chapter break, we think, okay, well, this is a change in scenery, or this is a change of the scene. But really, if we just continue reading, I think we're going to notice that Moses doesn't leave just yet. In fact, it's almost as if he begins in verse number 4 with, I'm going to leave, but I just have one more thing to say to you. And the one more thing he's going to say is what harkens back to chapter 4 and verses 21 through 23. And the author gives us a little insight in verse 11 and verse 1. Again, probably better understood as the Lord had said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh, which talks about the death of the firstborn. And that first section of chapter 11, verses 1, 2, and 3 actually is referencing a number of texts that have previously already been stated and written. So in verse 4, basically, verse 4 picks up at the end of verse 29. Before Moses actually leaves, he says, oh, one more thing. This is what Yahweh says. All the firstborns are about to die. And you might think, well, how cruel of a thing this is for Yahweh to do such a thing. But remember, this is exactly what had happened to his people previously. What Yahweh is doing in this moment is he is avenging the evil and the wickedness of Egypt, specifically of Pharaoh, just as Pharaoh had called for a slaughter of the Israelites for male children. So now that is what Yahweh is doing. Yahweh is getting retribution for that. There's going to be a great cry, and they're going to call you, and they're going to say, no, now you need to leave. You need to leave. Get out, and we're going to be gone. Moses says, this is what's going to happen. And once Moses says this, it's just very interesting to me the way this is written. And he went out from Pharaoh's presence fiercely angry. I wonder why he's fiercely angry. I don't know if you've thought about that before. Didn't really read anything that gave any indication why he was fiercely angry. I read it personally as this being Moses being fiercely angry that it all came to this. Now, Pharaoh has been so hard-hearted that it came to Yahweh waging this real type of war against him, in which there are going to be many casualties for that. That's the way I read it. Maybe you read it different, and that's fine. Maybe you want to share that below why you think Moses was a bit angry here, within not just a bit angry, but fiercely angry here as he leaves Pharaoh's presence. And the thing is, what Pharaoh says doesn't come to pass. He does see Moses again, but instead of him killing Moses, he actually capitulates and folds before Moses, begging him for them to leave, just as Moses said would happen. So the Yahweh again tells Moses that he's not going to listen to you. He's hard-hearted. He's going to allow for all this to take place so that I will show myself to be great, so that I can perform these wonders. And again, not only will they know that I'm Yahweh, but the world will know that I am Yahweh. And most importantly, you, my people, will know that I am Yahweh. Beginning in chapter 12, we kind of leave the narrative for a bit. There's not really much action. There's much more instruction here at this moment, where the instructions concerning the Passover are given. This right here is going to, it's not only going to affect what takes place now on this day or the upcoming day, but this is also something that's going to set the scene for future events. This, what takes place on this night, is going to have very long lasting effects whenever it comes to Israel and their religious observances. So the command is, to begin with, that it's time to reset the calendar, that this month right now is going to begin a new calendar month for you. And on the 10th day of this month, so it seems as if I'm reading this correctly, in 10 days, this process is going to begin. The process of selecting a young lamb or a young goat lamb. It needs to be male, needs to be unblemished, because Yahweh deserves the best. And you're going to, in a few days after that, so you collect it on the 10th day, then on the 14th day, you're going to slaughter it. You're going to prepare to cook it, but you're also going to take the blood. And this is what's important for this process. You need to make sure that you put it across the doorway and on the doorpost, put on the lintel and the doorpost. And we'll see why that's significant here in a moment. And then you're going to eat it that night. You're going to roast it over fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. So this meal then is not only going to be functionally good for them, it allows for quick prep instead of boiling it, which will take longer. You're going to roast it. You're going to eat it with unleavened bread. But then there's also going to be a reminder with these bitter herbs that are going to be eaten with it, the bitterness of their slavery. So this is both functional and also symbolic as far as this meal goes. They're told how they're not to eat it. If you have any left, it must be burned. But as you're eating it, this is how you need to, needs to be your, I guess, how you're dressed and what you're ready to do. You need to be dressed for travel. You need to have your sandals on your feet. You have your staff in your hand. You need to be ready to eat it in a hurry, because this is the Lord's Passover. Once you eat this, things are really going to go down, and it's going to be time for you to leave this land, because verse 12, I will pass through the land of Egypt on this night and strike every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, both people and animals. And I've alluded to this being a battle between Yahweh and Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt. And now it's explicitly stated as that being the reality. Because what he says is, I am Yahweh. I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. Everything that stands in rebellion against me, I am going to judge. And this ultimate judgment is going to be seen in the death of the firstborn. But it's the blood on the houses where you are staying that will be a distinguishing mark for you. Remember, God has shown that he makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel, and he's shown that a number of times throughout a few of the plagues, that this plague happened here, but it specifically mentioned that it did not affect the land of Goshen or did not affect the Israelites and their possessions. Here, it is this putting of the blood on the lintel and the doorpost that is going to make the distinction between you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will be among you to destroy you whenever I strike Egypt. So again, a very strong distinction made between Egypt and Israel. And what's going to happen is then in verse 14, this day is to be a memorial for you. So moving forward, this is going to be something that you're going to remember. So again, the effects of this, or the events of this night, are going to be much more long lasting than just a short period of time. It's not just something you're going to do now and then you can forget about it. No, what you do now is going to be something that you are going to remember every year moving forward. And if you remember your Israelite history, there were many years and long stretches of time in which the Passover was not observed, and that those were years in which Israel was counted as being unfaithful to the Lord. They did not remember the faithfulness of Yahweh and the deliverance that he had offered to them here in the Passover. Verse number, let's see here, it speaks about those who do not do this are to be cut off from Israel, just showing the real serious nature of observing this command. Again, ties back into some of what we've seen, or what I just mentioned, that they were not faithful when they did not do these things. Let's see here. He summons all the elders in verse 21. and tells them everything that you need to do, gives the instructions specifically to them. So Yahweh first tells this to Moses and Aaron, and then Moses and Aaron call the elders and they give them the same instruction. So it's a bit repetitive in the text, but it is just showing us how this information was disseminated to the people. And after this instruction is given to the elders, now it is time for this night to take place. So at midnight, in verse 29, Yahweh struck every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from Pharaoh to the prisoner to the livestock. And as they got up, there was a great wailing within the land, because they saw that there was not a household in which there was not someone dead. God did strike them just as he said he would. And it's at this moment that Pharaoh completely folds. He summons Moses and Aaron during the night. During the night, doesn't even wait, but during the night he calls them and says, "Get out immediately." So once again, he had said previously that if you stand before me, you're going to die. But that's not the case at all. No. He ends up folding. He ends up being the one who blinks first, because he has been defeated. He has been shown who truly has the power. So get out, everybody, your men, your women, your children, your flocks, everybody, just get out, get out, get out. And then there's this interesting comment, and also bless me. Also bless me. I wonder what his mindset is here. I wonder if this is him saying, "Okay, you've won, so now you can bless me." Well, it's a little too late for that. And I don't, it does not say at all that Moses does bless Pharaoh, that he wishes peace upon him. And probably what we can read into that is the fact that Pharaoh's going to go back on what he says. He's eventually going to pursue them again. So no, God is not going to bless Pharaoh, because Pharaoh's heart is still very hard. And Pharaoh is still going to rebel against the Lord, and it's going to end up costing him and many of his soldiers their lives. Verse 33, the Egyptians pressure the people to leave. They're scared. They think they're bad luck at this point. Get out. We're all going to die. And the people do that. They collect all the things. They're ready to go. They collect them all, and they're ready to get out. But they don't leave, though, until they receive the silver and the gold items and the clothing. And the text says the Lord gave the people such favor with the Egyptians that they gave them what they requested. In this way, they plundered the Egyptians. Israel didn't sneak out the back door. No, Israel walked through the front door of Egypt. They walked through the front door with their dignity, and their exaltation is the humiliation of Egypt. Whenever it says that Yahweh gave them such favor with the Egyptians, this is almost like a servile humility, that the Egyptians were almost scared of the Israelites. They revered them, and so they submitted to them by giving them these very things. The Israelites traveled from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 able-bodied men on foot, besides their families. Again, some people estimate this would mean that Israel would be almost 2 million to 3 million in size and population, which is an incredible thing to consider. But another interesting note is verse 38, that it says a mixed crowd also went out with them, along with a huge number of livestock, both flocks and herds. A mixed crowd. So does that mean then that there were Egyptians that went out with Israel as well? Did they see, what was it, this final plague and everything that preceded it? Had it changed the hearts of some of the Egyptians so that they wanted to go out and serve this God who obviously was all powerful? Very interesting, and that might be what's being mentioned here. And given the instructions of 43 through 50 or 43 through 49 concerning the resident alien that is among them, how they could participate in the Passover through submitting to the covenant through circumcision, maybe that's part of that as well. 40 through 42 talks about how long they were there. They were there 430 years. And everything that took place here ended up being, again, a memorial, a vigil for what Yahweh had done. Verse 50 says, then all the Israelites did this. They did just as Yahweh had commanded Moses and Aaron. On that same night, Yahweh brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt according to the military divisions. That's something we've seen a couple of times. We saw that in verse 17, verse 41. We're also going to see it in verse 18 of chapter 13, which says that they were in military formation. So that's probably what's at play here, is that this is an act of war. God led them as the leader of this army and striking them. And now there is basically war between the two nations at this point, war between Israel and Pharaoh. They're going to go out in their military divisions and they're going to be prepared for battle. And that's what Pharaoh wants to bring against them, but never do they actually fight. They might be in battle formation. Again, as we see in verse 18 of chapter 13 says, the Israelites left the land of Egypt in battle formation, but they never actually fight. Yahweh does all the work, and he shows that he is the one who truly will deliver them. So that's what we see so far in the Passover Exodus narrative of chapters 11 and 13. We're going to look at a bit more of what is said in chapter 13 tomorrow. Actually, I think we have a double read tomorrow as well. Let me double check that real fast to make sure that I get that right. Let's see here. Yeah, tomorrow we'll read chapters 13 and 14 together as well, which will take us all the way through them leaving Egypt. It'll give us some details about the route of the Exodus, and it'll also tell us about what happened at the Red Sea. And it's going to bring us right up until chapter 15, which contains the Song of Moses, as it is referred to. If you have any questions or comments about the text, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. I appreciate you reading together with me on this Friday. A bit of a long read, but the climax of the 10 plagues narrative of the Exodus. It's been a great read. I appreciate you doing it with me. Hopefully you've been refreshed in your understanding and knowledge of the text. Maybe you've learned even a little bit that can help you grow in your faith as well. Again, thanks for tuning in on this Friday. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, reading together from Exodus 13 and 14. We'll see you then. Take care and God bless.